Yeah.
Okay, Sandra.
Carrie.
We got a big fish we're interviewing today.
Big fish. That's what Carrie did to me on stage during Rusalka.
I'm sorry, but you deserved it.
Well, we will say that right now we are waiting for our guest to join us. So we don't know how this is all going to come out, good or bad. But we have some real questions for the general manager of
the Metropolitan Opera, Peter Gelb.
Do, do, do.
Bum, bum, bum.
That we want to hear your opinion and your side of the story, because there just seems to be so much floating around, not just in the Met, but worldwide. And there's just a lot of misinformation. And I think all of us artists, we just want to know what the truth is and what's really going on. So
I think we'd all like to know what the truth is, but, including me. But I mean, I think we all have our ideas of what is right and wrong, and I think that I try to pursue my life and professionally as well as personally according to a strict kind of code of conduct of what I think is the right thing to do. And certainly there are reasons behind it. I don't expect everyone to agree with me. I think we're in a very tough place. I have a singular goal though, which is to get the Met through this crisis. And I am determined to succeed in that endeavor. And I am, fixated on that.
Peter!
Hey!
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fine.
I'm good. I'm in Munich. I'm in Madrid.
Well, they'll start with the letter M, so that's kind of...
Yeah, well, no, we were just talking about Munich. So yeah, in Madrid and singing.
Well, that's cool.
I'm in the woods drinking whiskey and singing, so there you go.
Well, that's very good.
Carrie Alkema. I don't know if you've ever met.
No, I don't think we have.
Hello.
Very nice to meet you. I apologize. I'm drinking water, but
rude.
It's okay. It's 9 o'clock here, so I can.
You can pretend it's vodka if you like.
Well, it's okay, Peter. How you doing? How are things? I mean.
Well, asking someone like me or any one of us how you're doing these days is a loaded question. So
I know.
Truly.
Getting by, managing, day to day.
Doing my best.
Yeah.
But we can talk about all that, whatever you like.
How is Carrie Lynn?
Carrie Lynn is fine, except that all her gigs keep getting canceled. Although she still has her debut at the Paris Opera lined up for November, and although she is receiving messages about precautionary measures they're planning to take, so far that's still on. So hopefully, she's conducting Carmen there.
Cool.
I heard that Paris is just shutting down again.
They shut down all the bars, but I don't know.
Well, we will say a little prayer that she gets there, because that's important for her. It really is. Carrie and I have both worked with her, and she's an amazing musician, person. So
yeah,
that's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
It's the truth.
It is. I had a really great time. We had fun.
Great. Well,
okay.
Shall we?
Yes, I have a question. So you do not do a lot of interviews, and I was really curious as to why you would agree to come on and do these shenanigans with the two of us.
Well, I haven't seen your show, so I don't know. We'll see. Okay. We'll see if I live to regret it. Or
are you actually going to be like, oh, sorry, internet connection, gotta go?
Yeah, but if I disappear from the screen, you'll know.
Oh, okay.
Although I notice it happens every time I'm watching MSNBC, whenever they say something provocative about Trump, the screen freezes. So
Yes.
Well, I think, it's Trump probably like with his finger, and then freezing everything just so that all of that doesn't get out. But
But
that's a whole.
I do interviews. I just,
Yeah.
I don't do that many interviews. It's not like I'm hiding myself because I have a lot, I have to, in order to pursue the artistic and economic agenda that I must pursue for the Met, I have to be out there and speak about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I mean, you've had a tough year, like everybody, but I always feel like you general directors, it's a little tougher than it is for us in a way sometimes. And I know that you've had to make some huge, tough decisions, and some are widely unpopular, but some are widely supported. So we just wanted to know if we could ask you some questions. You're happy to say, I'm not answering that, or
You
whatever you
can
want.
you can ask me any question you like.
thank you.
Okay,
Thank
cool,
you.
thanks.
Because I think that we want to hear your opinion and your side of the story, because there just seems to be so much floating around, not just in the Met, but worldwide. And there's just a lot of misinformation. And I think all of us artists, we just want to know what the truth is and what's really going on. So
I think we'd all like to know what the truth is, but including me.
I'm so ready.
But I mean, I think we all have our ideas of what is right and wrong, and I think that I try to pursue my life and professionally as well as personally according to a strict kind of code of conduct of what I think is the right thing to do. And certainly there are reasons behind it. I don't expect everyone to agree with me. I think we're in a very tough place. I have a singular goal though, which is to get the Met through this crisis.
Okay.
And I am determined to succeed in that endeavor. And I am, fixated on that. But at the same time, to achieve that, I can't be making only popular decisions, because there's no way that the Met will survive if we just try to run it as a popularity contest. That's not going to happen.
No, I don't think that works in any business model, to be quite honest. So,
Peter,
Right.
we're all on your side. We want the Met to stay open. We want to
Of
keep
course.
coming back and making music there and having the audience participate. And we know that there's so much that's out of your hands. And I don't think people know exactly how much really is out of your hands in all the decisions that
Well,
you have.
some is and some isn't. I have, I have somewhat of a fatalistic view towards things, in the sense that I can't change certain aspects of the way the nonprofit world works, but it doesn't stop me from trying. And certain things have to change in order for the Met to survive. And I believe the Met will survive.
So do I.
And I'm happy to give you any gory details you like.
oh, I love the gory details. Let's do it.
Well, what we wanted to do is kind of walk through, I mean, people, there's so much about you out there, about your childhood and your parents and your movement up to being
Pepper's and
general
vodka.
manager. Vodka, you're going to need it.
Welcome to the
One of my, just to digress for a moment,
Sure.
I used to be a documentary filmmaker, and I still am of sorts, but I collaborated on many films with the Maisel brothers and with Susan Frumke. And one of the films that I'm most proud of was the film we made about Rostropovich and Galina Vishnevskaya returning from exile and reclaiming their world in Russia after having been kicked out for 10 years for having harbored Solzhenitsyn. And the keeping up with Rostropovich as we were filming him in the dead of winter in Moscow was and then later on in what was still St. Petersburg, was an extraordinary took extraordinary resilience on the part of the filmmakers, because he was like a dynamo who was so wound up, and he would just never stop. And the very first night we got there, I was we sat down at this dinner in which he and his wife had reclaimed the apartment that they had lived in, which was given to them. It was where the Union of the Composers had their residences, and he had a very privileged apartment which he lived in with Vishnevskaya, that had been confiscated by kind of the arch enemy of artists at the time in Russia, this guy named Krinikov, who was Stalin's artistic henchman and who had lasted for 30 or 40 years, and had come up with all these famous accusations against Solzhenitsyn, against Shostakovich, I should say, and other composers, always accusing them of this mysterious word called formalism, which was a crime that a Soviet artist could never kind of recover from. Nobody quite knew what it meant, but it was very bad. And so the day that Rostropovich and Galina triumphantly reemerged in Russia during Perestroika, with Gorbachev in power, the very first night after first visiting the grave of his hero Shostakovich, he went to this apartment where all his friends who had stood loyally by him during these dark years gathered, and presented him with poems and icons, and he sat at the head of this table in this apartment he reclaimed with a half-gallon jug of Stolichnaya, which he then proceeded to pour tumblers full of vodka the size of this, and would make a toast and just down it completely, and seemed no worse for the wear. And then the next morning, after what must have been an hour's sleep, he was off to the grave of Sakharov to pay his respects there. Anyway, that was a great lesson in filmmaking and vodka drinking.
Vodka drinking, water.
That has
water looks just like
stood me well over the test of time. Anyway, sorry.
No, and you have why I didn't even know that the show that I had fallen in love with was your son's, until I was just so moved by the music in it. I thought, somebody has to know classical music to be pairing this type of music with this shot and this food. And I was actually on a show with Carrie Lynn when I discovered who it was. And of course I walk into rehearsal and I'm like, is this for real? And she said, yes. So then he fell in love with, I went down a rabbit hole of researching him and how that all came to be. And I found it really quite fascinating. But the love of music and the education that you and your first wife, his mom, raised them with this music was so important. And then how that's translated into, and then now I'm hearing about your life with documentaries and how that all kind of, came together. It's super cool.
Music's always been a part of your life, hasn't it?
Yes. I was not in a formal way, but as a child, I came from a very cultured family. My father was a drama critic on the New York Times. My mother was a writer. My mother was the niece of Jascha Heifetz, who was my great uncle.
Cool.
Cool. I remember meeting Heifetz when I was very young, and him being quite mean to me, as I recall. Really? He was performing piano parlor tricks at a party that my grandmother, his sister, was giving at her apartment on Park Avenue, in which he was playing the piano while holding an orange in each hand. And I remember shyly going up to him and asking him for his autograph, which he refused to give me. So that was
a relative, and he wouldn't
give my experience with Heifetz, who is not the nicest guy in the world, but he certainly was an important part of my growing up, in the sense that I felt very much connected to that kind of musical tradition. Okay. And years later, when I became the manager of Vladimir Horowitz, the fact that I was related to Heifetz sort of was like the pass that got me in the door there. I mean, they even though Horowitz had ultimately unfriended Heifetz, and they had like everyone who Horowitz came into contact with ultimately became his enemy. There are very few people who stayed his friends. But
I guess I shouldn't ask what kind of person he was then.
No, between him and his wife, it was quite a dynamic and tempestuous couple. I actually liked Horowitz very much.
Hmm.
But the fact that I was a relation of Heifetz was stood me well with them, with
Nice.
him and his wife.
Well, I just wanted to give a shout out to your son's show, Chef's Table, because it's beautifully shot. The stories are beautiful. The music is gorgeous. And I was so happy that I had discovered it, not knowing what the whole connection was. So anyway.
Well,
Awesome.
thank you. Thank you for saying. I'm very proud of my son.
I bet.
He's a brilliant man, and he and his wife, who's a very gifted agent in Hollywood. The two of them live out in LA. And
Nice.
one of the saddest parts of my relationship with my son and his wife, my daughter-in-law at the moment, is that my first grandson, Elliot, I have not seen in person other than FaceTime calls since February. So it's very, that's the difficulty of living in COVID and being bi-coastal.
Yeah.
But he's a terrific young child. Yeah. And my other son, who's also a talented person in film, who's a film editor, also lives in LA with his wife. So,
But got to start in Toronto, right?
Well, both of them actually had stints in Toronto, apprenticing for Niamh Fitchman, who's a very close friend of mine, who's the Canadian filmmaker.
Cool.
And in fact, Matthew's, my younger son, Matthew's wife, Danya, is the daughter of Larry Weinstein, who's a very accomplished Canadian filmmaker, and who used to be partners with Niamh. So we're all connected.
Oh, wow. Love it. That's super cool.
Well, okay.
All right, let's get to the nitty gritty.
What we thought was maybe you can walk us through sort of a timeline from when COVID started, the whole pandemic started, and the whole shutdown, and maybe talk from that forward. So from the shutting of the Met to the future of opera, through that, and give us some insight. Like, for instance, let's start with whose decision was it to close the Met, and how did that decision come about?
Right. Well, like many decisions that have taken place during COVID, with hindsight, they seemed completely inevitable and unavoidable. In the case of closing the Met, it was becoming increasingly obvious as we got into early March that there was a major health risk for our performers and for the audience. And I have to say, the governor of New York has handled this, I think, quite brilliantly. But, closing things down is a big decision. And it was really under pressure. I shouldn't say under pressure, that would be the wrong way to say it. But we made the decision. I made the decision in consultation, of course, with the leadership of the board of the Met and my senior staff. But I told them we had to shut down. And they said, well, should we shut down tomorrow? And I said, no, we're going to shut down right now, today. And we sent a message to the governor's office saying we were shutting down. Simultaneously, we knew that Clive Gillinson was making the same decision at Carnegie Hall. And Deborah Border was making the same decision at the Philharmonic. We were in close touch with each other. But we actually led the way in the sense that we told the governor and the mayor's office that we had to shut down. And later that afternoon, the governor, and we were very careful to let them know we were doing it. But later that afternoon, the governor announced that everyone had to shut down. I mean, all the performing arts. I'm not saying that we had an impact in that decision, but we certainly were the first to do it. And I believe, I remember I hadn't thought of it this way, but one of our stage managers sent me a note a couple of weeks later saying that, your decision may be the first decision by a general manager that might have saved a few lives. I wasn't thinking of it in those terms at all, but it's true. I mean, if you look at how this country has mismanaged this entire affair and how many lives could have been saved if proper action had been taken at the right time, and it still isn't being taken to this day. We have a sense of people who are in a position of authority who can control things have to exercise their authority responsibly. So the decision to shut down was the right decision, but there's no question, and we had to do it. and the decision, I know you wanted me to take you chronologically, but I'll just go
No,
to
it's
the most,
fine.
I'll go to the most recent decision, which was the decision to cancel the entire season. Also, clearly, there was no choice. I mean, you know, we're in a state, New York is after having been the epicenter of the pandemic in the United States, has now, thank God, in recent months, proven through great diligence to be one of the most safer, or one of the safer parts of the country.
Yeah.
But it intends to stay that way. And, you know, the governor and the mayor have made it very clear they're not going to permit any assemblies of more than 50 people. So, and that's going to carry on, you know, far into the future. You know, it's the governor and the mayor's office don't like to make long-term proclamation, you know, negative pronouncements, because it's bad for the, bad for the PR image of the state and the city. But we can't, you know, operate purely on the basis of false hope. We have to operate on the basis of reality. So you know, we knew we had to shut down. We knew the credibility of the Met is such that everyone knows, or everyone who knows anything about opera knows, it's not something you just open the front door and, you know, turn the key and it starts working.
There you go.
It takes months, several months. So even though back in May, when we made the decision that we would open on December 31, that seemed potentially credible back then, it certainly was no longer credible in recent weeks and months. And what we were waiting for, and why we didn't announce it even earlier, was the ability to put together in great detail the 21-22 season, so that we could simultaneously announce that 21-22 season and provide some hope and you know, some light at the end of the tunnel for the ticket buyers and donors who support the Met so loyally. We wanted to show them that there will be a Met, and something palpable in terms of programming that also I'd like to talk about a little bit if you want to.
Absolutely.
So I think it really reflects the programming we announced for 21-22 is a part, as you know, both of you know, we plan far in advance, but we also manage to change things when we have to or want to, and we made some adjustments to that 21-22 season that really makes it a season of great artistic and social responsibility. For opera to be meaningful to the public, it has to reflect the life in which we live, and it has to provide some kind of aspirational abilities for the performers and for the public, and so we thought it was really important to take the production of Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which I had already commissioned with Unique Nazes-Sagan. I haven't even mentioned Unique, and I should mention him very, very much, because he is my artistic partner in these
Yes.
decision making, in these artistic programming decisions. He's very much with me. He is now the music director. Has been now. This would have been his third season if it was on an accelerated timeline.
Already the third season?
Well, because we speeded it up, because we had a big gap, as you know. So and this would have been the season. Actually, this season that we've canceled would have been the season where he really would have taken the reins in terms of the number of operas he was going to conduct. It was going to be 6. Up until now, he didn't have the time in his schedule to do more than 3. So some of the planning for next year, for 21-22, had already been in the works at the time that that Unique was naming his or taking charge as music director, and some of it was not. And a lot, he's certainly very much responsible for a lot of the selection of conductors. The fact that we have 5 female conductors conducting this year is very much his strong influence and his ideas. The fact that we have such an emphasis on contemporary opera is very much a joint policy of the two of us. I mean, something that, you know, some of these commissions take years to develop and to gestate, and certainly in this season of 21-22, we have these three contemporary operas that will be getting their premieres that season, Met premieres. Is the largest number of new operas to get Met premieres in one season since 1928. Which is an indication of several things. It's an indication of how our audience is changing, because we don't shove things down the audience throat. That's not a good way to be a general manager, I've found. And when I've tried, it hasn't worked. But we also I think, very, with a sense of great self-assurance, program three contemporary operas, knowing that the audience is changing, and knowing that there is an audience for contemporary operas, proven by last season's great success of Akhenaten and Porgy and Bess.
Right, right.
And it also is evidence of the fact that there are so many great young composers out there right now, young and not so young, but composers who are creating magnificent new work that is written for the audience, it's written for success. And certainly Matt O'Coin's Eurydice, which we commissioned together with LA and then set up in LA first, which had considerable success last fall, which will be in the 21-22 season, is a remarkably fresh and vibrant opera that actually is original and actually memorable. You can remember the tunes, which is unusual for a modern piece. Fire Shut Up in My Bones, as I said, I heard, well, maybe I didn't say it, but I heard it at his premiere in St. Louis, and immediately asked Terence Blanchard if he would expand the piece. It was originally going to be done at the Met in 23. This is the big change. We moved it up 2 years. Terence, because a lot of he's a very successful film score composer, won an Academy Award for Black Klansman. And he, because the movie production schedule has been interrupted by COVID, has free time, fortunately, this year to do the additional writing that we asked him to do to expand the piece somewhat for the Met. And so we moved, so the big decision was moving that not only into the 21-22 season, but to the very opening night of the season, because we wanted to make a statement with that.
Right.
And then Brett Dean's Hamlet was a piece that I heard in Glyndebourne 3 or 4 seasons ago. It was a big popular success in Glyndebourne. I loved it, and felt the Met audience would love it too. So there we have 3 contemporary operas, and
it's time. It's time that that the world and especially New York City, I think, gets some of these new works, because I mean, honestly, I don't want to see another La Boheme again. You know,
but we also, well, I like La Boheme, but we also have, you know, new productions. David McVicker has done this fantastic new production of which, well, I should say fantastic. We haven't seen it yet, but the models are fantastic, and we're doing it in French for the first time in Met history first. But I asked him, and Unique asked him, if he could create kind of a reversible Don Carlos that could become Don Carlo. So one season we're doing it as Don Carlos, and then doing in the Italian version a year or 2 later. And we also have new productions of Rigoletto from Bart Scher, with Piotr Bechewa singing the Duke. And we have a terrific, and Quinn Kelsey, our rising young, brilliant American Verdi baritone from Hawaii, singing the title role. And Rosa Fiolo's a great Italian young soprano singing Gilda. And also we have a new Lucia from Simon Stone, the director, who is one of the most interesting directors around, who has not done an opera in New York yet, but several plays that have been very extraordinary. And
great.
That stars Nadine Sierra and Javier Camarena. So and then we have a lot of other revivals, and of course you'll be there, Sandra, and, which I'm very excited about.
Time to come back, yay!
Yeah, I'm so happy about that, and also about all of our future plans with you.
Oh, I know we can't spill those beans quite yet, but
I didn't give you. So the thing is, so so I gave you the beginning of COVID and the most recent update of COVID. In between has been, this ongoing nightmare of how do you deal with a company? How do you explain a company that is out of work? I know there's great concern, anger, bitterness about the fact that we have not paid a lot of people while this crisis has gone on. I understand it, but quite frankly, it's a matter of survival. For the Met to be able to weather this storm, it was necessary to, we're not some of the orchestras in this country have continued to pay their musicians during the crisis, but they were helped enormously by the government, which we weren't. They received PPP. This part of the last stimulus bill was payroll protection plan money, which were nonprofits of 500 people or less were eligible. So the New York Philharmonic, for example, was eligible. We, with 3,000 employees, were not eligible.
Too large.
We were too large. I mean, it's really unfair, but that's the way it is. We hired lobbyists. We have federal, state, local lobbyists who are working to try to win protection money for employees, and there's always a chance that the next stimulus bill might have it. But it's not. We just could not afford, literally, to pay everyone wages while we're not performing. And in fact, the contracts are designed that way
is this the force majeure clause that we're talking about?
Yeah. So, force majeure, of course, I guess nobody was, when those force majeure clauses were designed, nobody was thinking they would last for a year and a half. But on the other hand, if they weren't there and if we were paying everyone, we would be out of business right now. So the question is, as painful as it is, I tried to set an example by not taking a salary starting at the end of March. And all the senior staff took big salary cuts, and we also laid off, or furloughed, I should say. Laid off is the wrong word because they're coming back. Furloughed a percentage of the administrative staff. The administrative staff that is still working are those people who are keeping the Met going. It's the media team that's been running this highly successful operation of getting our nightly streams out into the world, and which has had enormously positive effects on the Met's relationship with the larger public, and the marketing department that has to get the messaging out, and of course a development office which has to raise all this money. And so those are the essential, and the production and artistic departments that have to plan these various different scenarios for long-range planning. Without them, we wouldn't be able to function. So we have a skeletal crew inside the Met itself, cleaners and
physically inside the building.
Physically, cleaners, engineers. And we were paying them, sort of extra pay for taking the risk of being in the Met. To keep the Met going. We have a skeletal stage crew that's been coming in to run the stage machinery to make sure it's operational. Of course, we kept paying the health care of the musicians and the chorus during this, and we've committed to paying them that throughout the entire closure.
Sorry, we have two questions just to kind of go back. So do you now see, are contracts going to be changed in the future with that force majeure clause? Because how can we keep that clause in our contracts going forward? Force majeure, okay, the pandemic's going. What if it goes on for 5 years, Peter?
Well, if it goes on for 5 years, you won't have to worry about it at all, because there will be no future contracts or no opera companies. Yeah, these are tough questions. My concern though right now, and I'm sure you can understand my perspective, I hope, is how do I get this company back? How do we start performing again? How do we find a way forward that can keep the artists particularly, I mean, Sandra, you and the great soloists of the Met, certainly, I mean, what would opera be without you? You guys are the stars, and it's what the audience pays money to come and see and hear. But, fortunately, or for better or for worse, you're part-time employees of the Met. And you have, as much as we want you to think of the Met as your home company, you obviously have other, you have a lot of other home companies.
Mm-hmm.
The people who really are hurt in this the most are the people whose full-time jobs are working for the Met. The orchestra and the chorus and the stagehands, and the people who really, their entire livelihood depends upon getting a paycheck from the Met. And those are the people who I feel very badly about the most, because they have not been receiving money from us. And that's why, now that we're facing such a long-term, when this began, nobody expected it would knock out an entire extra season. We thought, it would knock out the spring and maybe the summer, and we'd come back at some point. And now we know we're not coming back, at least for a year. And now that we know that, I'm trying to find a way forward with those full-time members of the company, so that they can have some kind of financial benefits going forward. I won't go into all the details because we have to negotiate.
So union deals, are these issues with the unions that?
Well, it's all driven by the unions and the members of the unions who are the employees of the Met. For whom we would like to find a way forward where they can receive some form of compensation in the months ahead, where they haven't been previously, but also to take on the burden of the collective responsibility that is necessary for the future of the Met. Because what happens is, even when we return, the audience is not going to return the same day. The audience is going to come back slowly over a period of 1 or 2 or 3 years. So we need, and the Met, or even before this pandemic, was in not very strong financial situation. So we need
69% average, wasn't it, last season?
Well, it was creeping up the box office, but even if we were 100%, we still have to raise. 100% box office would result in about $120 million, or 100. Somewhere around $120 million in revenue. Our annual costs are $300 million. Right. So even when the house is sold out, we're losing a lot of money.
And there's no government funding, unlike here in Europe. It's a completely different.
An infinitesimal amount of government funding. It's less than 0.5% between city, state, and federal funding. So but we need to. I feel very strongly that for the Met to be sustainable, to have a future, we need to come back artistically more powerful than ever. You can't, where we don't want to cut is on the artistic presentations, because that is what gives us an audience. That's what gives us donations. What we have to cut is on our labor costs, which represent 2/3 of the costs of the Met. So we have to find a way forward that has a less costly company, but not less productive. So that's a challenge. But it is the way forward, that if people understand, that if people get it, then they will understand that this is a way that we can guarantee their jobs. And it's very difficult in the way the history of labor and unions in this country is quite complicated. And unions were formed for a reason, a very good reason, which was to protect workers and to give them rights and to give them power when at a time when unions were formed, when power was needed. But like everything, you have to balance it. Shifts in power have to occur from time to time. And when I first came to the Met, I was taken by one of the union leaders who said to me, when I was explaining the economic disparity of the Met and how difficult it is for the Met to function and rely so much on donations. And this union leader very patiently said to me, your employees will know you're telling the truth about this when you go out of business. And I said to him that that's not something we want to wait for. You know, that's a terrible attitude. That's it. And but that's sort of how things have evolved over decades and decades of management union
Yeah.
relations. And
Our soloist, our union that Carrie and I, we talk about the AGMA soloist union a lot because we
right,
feel like it has let us down. It's not really representing us, the soloists, as well as all the chorus and all of that equally. And it's I know it's a slippery slope, and one I think now that people are very passionate about because of the pandemic and because of the lack of work of all of us, and we keep paying dues for nothing. And you're right, it is, in a way, it's an abuse of power that we feel. Am I correct, Carrie, in what I'm saying about AGMA?
Yeah, I mean, with the release of paperwork that should have never, I guess, seen the light of day, and it was in black and white right there, that we don't really, you know, excuse my French, give a shit about the soloists. It was, you know, everybody thought, well, why are we even paying dues in the first place if we are not part of the importance like the chorus is. So, and we've all over the years have seen all of our things that would benefit us go away slowly but surely. We're taken off the table. That's a whole nother discussion. There's a couple things throughout this conversation, if you don't mind, that I feel a real huge responsibility to ask you, from opinions of chorus members and orchestra members, because and this is what ties into the union, is that when the concert happened in April, or the concerts that are happening, you know, like with Sandra, etc., how was the decision made not to use chorus members, not to use the Metropolitan Orchestra members? Was that a conflict with the union? And if so, why couldn't there be some kind of a collective agreement that could help everyone at the table, and some concessions were made just for this specific time period so that some people could have money put in their coffers, and that the Met really did look like a unified family because everyone was being used in some shape or form? If you don't mind answering that.
no, sure. The first of all, I just want to go back to your comments, your and Sandra comments about AGMA. You know, I don't want to get in the middle of that one,
No.
but
Hot damn mess. Hot mess.
so I just would like to say that, you know, certainly when it comes to individual artists who have contracts at the Met, I understand they're part of the AGMA agreement, but we do negotiate separately with the artists for their contracts. You know, I think there's a lot of misinformation flowing around these activities that the Met has been undertaking. And the first of all, the at-home gala was, you know, like everything, you know, you do things with the best of intentions, and somebody's always unhappy. The at-home gala was done in April. And I think the timing of it's important because it was a month or so after things had shut down, and we had asked the orchestra and the chorus if they would like to participate in this. Nobody was paid anything for that event. It was meant to be an event, and it worked, I think, very successfully. It was meant to be an event to connect opera singers who were stuck in their various lockdowns, and the public who was, you know, didn't know what had hit them. Nobody knew what had hit them, and we still don't know what has hit us. But at the time, it was an event meant to engender goodwill for everyone, and nobody was paid. The whole thing was done on a production budget. I think it was like $80,000. It was all done by Skype. And $80,000 may sound like a lot of money, but that's like nothing, you know, compared to, you know, a typical live and HD show costs like about $1.3 million.
Right.
So it was, you know, it was a real homegrown, homespun event, and and it helped raise money for the Met. But, you know, when we're raising money for the Met, we're raising money for an institution which ultimately is the place that when its survival will guarantee the jobs of the people who work for the Met, like the orchestra and the chorus. So, you know, you can't lose sight of that. I think it's very important. The after the success of the at-home gala, which was an enormous success, we made contributions because we wanted to see if we could continue showing it, and there were no rights cleared. It was just like a one-time only thing. So we made contributions to the orchestra and to the chorus of $100,000 each, so that they would feel good about it and about their participation, and allow us to continue to show the programs.
Okay.
Show the program. The one of the things that the Met, that I have to do as the head of the Met, is constantly try to demonstrate to our donors and to the public that we are not losing our entrepreneurial mojo, and that we have to keep showing that we're doing stuff that shows the Met, even when we can't perform in the Opera House, and we cannot perform in the Opera House. You know,
Okay.
some companies in Europe can do it with different health situation.
Okay.
And the different economic situation, we cannot. We want very much to be able to find a way going forward where we have arrangements with the orchestra and the chorus in these lean, dark months ahead, where we can provide them with some kind of compensation, and hopefully then they can actually work with us. But I think that, you know, part of the problem is that it's a kind of a two-way street. At the time when we were thinking of these programs, these recitals abroad, honestly, it was at a time when first of all, from a purely practical point of view, most of these concerts were designed for one or two singers with a pianist. A couple of them had a couple of extra players who were involved. Okay. And you know, from a practical point of view, I don't really believe that even if we had asked our musicians, you know, to go and play, that I think Roberto Alagna and Alexander Kurzak had 5 string players who did arrangements or did reorchestrations of arias for their 5 instruments. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even if we, putting aside contracts and all that other kind of stuff, from a purely practical point of view, the Met Orchestra couldn't have flown to France. I couldn't go to France and be there to produce it.
But there were ways of being able to do stuff, you know, with orchestras in their, players in their own homes, to be able to and have, you know, a professional company put that all together so that there could be, you know, everybody's listening to tracks, everybody's, you know.
Sure. And we did that with the at-home gala. You know, the thing is, part of you know, I don't know how at a certain point, just doing things from tracks at home gets kind of boring. But
it was a way to include them, I think, is where.
Yeah,
so
but we have a lot of time between now and next fall, and they're
okay. So I have questions about that, because
I'm just saying though that I would not give up on the idea of our not collaborating with members of the orchestra and the chorus. We have to find an economic framework where we can work with them.
Got it.
In the months ahead. And when that happens, I'm sure we'll be able to find projects that we can do together as well.
Okay. So is there no way for the your opera house, to have enough people in there with cameras and singers on stage to do something? Are you not allowed by New York state law to have, like, when you say that there's only 50 people allowed in the opera house, is there a way to do any kind of chamber something with singers and people with professional recorders on there?
There probably could be a way of, I mean, if the number of people was less than 50, there could be a way of doing something in the opera house at some point. The question is, you know, artistically and in terms of, you know, what the impact is going to be in such a project, you know, whether it's worth doing or not. You know, I was impressed the other day. The Proms had this event. I think it was the Proms, where they had the musicians and chorus, or was the Royal Opera. They had them spread out all over the house. I mean, that's a really cool thing to do. Mm-hmm. If, you know, but we just can't do things, you know, unless there's some economic structure behind it. Right now, and I don't want to get into the details too much, because I think it's really not fair to the orchestra, the chorus. But if we don't have an arrangement with them, we can't do anything. So we need to find a way where we can have an arrangement with them. Philadelphia Orchestra, for example, is doing these things with Unique. They still have a contract that they're operating under. We don't have, our economic situation right now is such that we cannot pay an entire company to do some socially distanced, tiny project that will cause us even greater financial duress. But at some point, if we have an economic structure for it, and we got a lot of time between now and next fall to figure some of these things out.
Okay. The other question I had was, there was a video of you talking about those kinds of cuts that across the board are going to happen once the opera house is able to open. I have to disagree with you on one thing. I truly believe in America, especially, that if there is a vaccine and we're able to take it, I think that the doors will be packed. I think that people will be running to Broadway, to opera, to live theater, because we all miss it and need it so tremendously much. So I think that I would be surprised if your ticket sales weren't higher, at least for the first season. So my question is, if the fat has already been cut from the company and people aren't being paid and salaries have been reduced, then is that enough to not have to make so many drastic cuts to the artists and the musicians coming back in the fall? Or closing the doors is such a drastic financial windfall that there's no way to come? Am I asking the right question?
I don't think you mean windfall. Windfall is when you're making lots of money, unless that's what you meant.
Yeah, I think I guess because other companies that I know of, or that I'm privy to know the information of multi-million, billion-dollar companies. I mean, when this happened in March, everybody just started cutting the fat everywhere. Where some people were doing 2 or 3 jobs, vice presidents were doing jobs of 2 or 3 other people. To make sure that there was enough financial resources to come back when they could hire people again. So,
I think the mistake that you're making, if you're making, and I don't mean to say you're making a mistake, but is that we are not a for-profit company. The Met begins with a situation where we have a $300 million a year budget when we're performing.
okay.
Half of that money is earned revenue. Any business, a normal business, half of that money comes from the box office. Any normal business that had a balance sheet like that would not be in business. So the way the Met has operated over the years is to rely upon the generosity of donors who step up and make up the difference between the annual operating costs and the earned revenues of the company.
Okay.
And that has been increasingly a pressure point in recent years for these donors who are tired of giving us these huge amounts of money beyond what they normally would give.
Sure.
So they've been giving us emergency funding for years, and so we're now this crisis has knocked us off balance much more.
Okay.
So what we want to be able to do is, I mean, I wish what you said is true, and I would send you a bottle of champagne if you're right, but to go with your whiskey.
Yeah.
But I don't believe you're young, and you do not represent the mental attitude of the older audience, which comprises a large part of our audience. The average age of the Met audience is 57, and those are the prime target group for catching this disease. And when this disease is eradicated, they are not going to. We've surveyed our audiences. We're in touch with them all the time, and they say, first of all, a lot of people don't believe the vaccine is. People say they don't even want to take a vaccine.
I know.
They're scared. They're scared of a vaccine that may not be safe. They want to wait and see what happens. It's going to take months, if not several years, before people really feel comfortable. I think a lot of people will be like you. I mean, you know, you think I don't want to get back in the theater? I mean, I'm dying to
Yeah.
get back in the theater.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be slow, and we're not trying to, you know, there are 15 different unions whose employees work at the Met.
Wow.
There are some unions that are very highly paid, and there are some unions that are not so very highly paid.
Right.
We need kind of a collective sacrifice where the people who are the highest paid are willing to give up some of their money so that we can afford to come back. If the box office, when the box office returns, then, you know, money that has been cut can be restored. And this is similar, you know, the Boston Symphony recently made a deal with its players where they cut, I think, 37% or something, but it's based upon a recovery program. So when the box office recovers, money that has been cut from people's salaries gets restored along with it. So, you know, I think there is a fair way of approaching this. I know life, you know, life is unfair. We're all miserable.
It's a horrible time. It's terrible.
It's a horrible time.
Day drinking.
But we have to, you know, sort of face reality, you know. So you can, as I said at the beginning, you can ask me any question you like, and I think you have. So and I'm fine with it. But I do think that you know, we can't live in a fantasy world just because you know, because we're members of a union or not. I mean, we have to. There's a reason why all these businesses. You say businesses. A lot of smart businessmen made savings and tried to protect themselves for the future. A lot of businesses have gone out of business.
Yeah, they have.
Yes.
I mean, look at how many people lost their jobs the other day. United Airlines and American Airlines, like 30,000 people. You know,
Unbelievable.
We have not fired anybody. We have laid people. We've put them on furlough. We're continuing to pay their medical coverage. Their jobs are there for them to come back to, you know. So I don't think that, and we, you know, probably deserve to be going to bankruptcy more than anybody because we have a terrible balance sheet. But we're fighting for an art form. We're fighting for the people who believe in this art form because art is so important. Opera is so important.
Yes.
And these people's jobs are so important. So even though they may be angry and mad as hell at me right now because we're not paying them for the time being, we are prepared to pay them and prepared to keep their jobs and prepared to save this company. But you know, it's not an easy job. It's not easy to accomplish. And I can live with the hate that goes with it.
Okay, I had a question because I went down the rabbit hole to at least be prepared for this and was reading a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of anger, and I was just wondering how you, as the general director of this amazing opera house, bring back a sense of unity when the doors are able to open.
Yes, exactly. Can you all hear me too?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You disappeared for a while.
Yeah, my computer decided to do an update right in the middle.
Oh, that was fabulous.
Sorry, Peter.
I wanted to know about the unity. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's a very good question. I mean, I don't know the answer to it right off. You know, I do know that individually, the people who work for this company have incredible pride in their work and in their accomplishments.
Yeah.
And I would hope that, you know, as you hope that people will flood back into the opera house with enthusiasm, I would hope that when the opportunity finally comes about that we can work together again, that we'll find a way to do it. I think that, but I don't know for sure. But I certainly do. And I would hope that people understand, even the people who might hate me right now, will understand that I'm doing it not out of spite or to be mean. What I'm doing is ultimately to, you know, with what leaders are supposed to do, which is take tough decisions and try to look ahead and try to think about the greater good of everyone in the end of the day. And, you know, and so I would hope that some people or many people will realize that even though they're pissed off at me now, that maybe later on they'll understand, if the company comes back together, and it will, that what the actions I took were necessary.
Okay.
Thank you. No, honestly, that's what today was for. We wanted to hear what you're feeling, what your thoughts are, and all of that, because you know, there's a lot of the internet is a great thing and it's a horrible thing, and social media the same way. That people have so many opinions right now, and I feel like your voice, like your campaign, the voice must be heard, and I feel like we weren't hearing your voice and your thoughts. So thank you for saying what you just said, because I think that clarifies a lot of how hard you've been working and where you stand right now in all of this. And it can't be an easy job.
No, not especially dealing with what, I mean, from what we all understand, especially with, you said how many unions? 15 unions.
Right.
What happens, I mean, this is a very naive question because I don't understand the whole thing with unions. What happens if the unions say, we're not doing that, we're not negotiating with you? What happens? I mean, if the unions don't figure out, and I want to say both sides don't figure out how to come together and get along and figure out what's best for everyone, for this business to move forward and for this wonderful opera house to keep its doors open, how do you make that happen?
Well, you know, in the end of the day, if people don't want to work together, it's very hard to make them work together. Unions have an obligation when contracts expire to negotiate. And historically, in most cases, negotiations end sometimes after a long bitter period, or not, they end with an agreement, and if they don't, then the business ceases to exist. So, you know, I believe though that the people who work at the Met believe in the company and believe in the art form, and ultimately will understand that we all have to make a sacrifice for this business to continue and for us to be able to continue to produce great opera on our stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I have a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
I have a question completely, because I don't want to harp on unions all day. President Trump has changed the visa laws radically in the last year. How is that affecting you at the Met now? Peter needs a drink for that too.
Peter's like, I gotta go.
I'm going to finish my vodka.
I don't want to talk to these ladies.
You know, my understanding of the visa, you know, it's not just in the last year. It's for several years now. The visa application process has become increasingly difficult, and it makes our life much harder. It certainly harms our ability to be flexible in terms of bringing in singers at the last moment. It has changed. I mean, it is responsible. The visa policies of the government are responsible for a lowering in the quality of the art form, because artists who could previously be able to come in at the last minute can't. So it's it's just another hurdle that we have to work around.
Do you envision the Met becoming more an American-centric opera house because out of necessity? Or
I think, you know, we've always prided ourselves in having the greatest singers in the world on our stage, and we want to continue to do that as to the extent that we, you know, can. And so far, we've been able to do that. Of course, you know, if you have a situation where you have a health pandemic, which say bifurcates the world, you know, then things are different. And at one point, you know, I was imagining a situation where, before I realized that we couldn't open until there is a real cure that would affect not only America but Europe as well. But I was imagining a scenario where European singers wouldn't be able to get into America, and we would have to basically go with all American cast. But there are lots of great American singers, as we know. So
right.
So we're okay with that.
Yep.
If there is not a vaccine, is there any way that we could figure out a way to have a ton of testing like they're doing in Europe for us to feel a little bit more comfortable coming to work?
Well, you know, the testing that's being done in Europe is, you know, it's done on a very, very, you know, they're doing like, they don't have, no company that is doing, I shouldn't say that because I guess they're doing it in Vienna. I think it's very difficult in America, given this, and we're not on our own. You know, the governments in Europe that are allowing opera companies to perform with testing are running these companies basically. I mean, the Minister of Culture in Germany is telling the intendants of the opera companies what to do.
Okay.
We don't have anything like that system here. We're in a situation, we're in the same boat with Broadway and with all the other performing arts companies. And, the local government is not going to allow us to do it. So, even if we could figure out a way, and obviously there are ways of having rapid testing. Obviously, you don't want the rapid testing the White House uses, because it doesn't work. But
True.
I think it's not practical, really, in the end of the day.
Okay.
And there's no, I can sit around thinking about all kinds of things like, touchless doors and toilets that you don't have to touch, and all the kinds of things that people would like to have in a future where we're in a germophobic society. Nobody wants to ever touch anything ever again.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, we have to think beyond that in a way. We really do have to rely upon the end of this disease. We have to rely upon the vaccine working eventually. And that is the way forward. Otherwise, I mean, look at what's happening in Europe right now. As Sandra was saying at the beginning of the conversation, every day, one city shuts down, another city opens up, or more.
Well, I'm in Madrid, which is in partial lockdown. I mean, we are. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I've been reading about it. That recital we did with Joyce DiDonato a few weeks ago started in Barcelona, then moved to Antwerp, and then moved to Bochum, Germany, all in 2 weeks, because we were like one step ahead of the virus.
Right.
So
right, exactly, and that's why ours has been postponed with Piotr. It's the getting around the country. I mean, we live in Canada, my husband and I, and trying to negotiate when we're going home and have to quarantine for 2 weeks and then going back, and it's a whole nightmare. But the good thing, having had the test here, I've had 2 tests, one in Barcelona and one here in Madrid, and I have to apologize to you, Peter, because I couldn't do the at-home gala, but I couldn't say it then because I had COVID.
Oh my God, you did?
Yeah. And, we didn't know what kind of stigma was going to be attached to it.
Right.
But now I couldn't get a COVID test in Canada because my fever was 0.1 degree too low. You had to have 100-degree fever, and I was 99.9. But now my test here, my blood test revealed that I 100% had it. And I have 100% strong antibodies. So
that's great, though. It's great that you got through it and it didn't affect your lungs or anything.
Right.
No, I was one of the few, the lucky people. But so I know it's a real disease, and I know that the testing does work, and it's not a false sense of security by any means, but it allows us here in Europe right now to get back for who knows how long. But do you see, is there any kind of...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm very excited that we have a makeup date of January 23 for that.
Yeah.
Me too. Piotr is. I just saw Piotr in Barcelona, and he is beyond excited. We are so ready for it. And, the audiences, I think, are all going to be loving this. The recital that we put together, it's pretty... It's some new music for Piotr, too, so it's going to be fun.
That's so cool.
But do you envision any kind of... When singers can get back into the Met, can you do any kind of online concerts from the Met stage, possibly with a reduced orchestra or a reduced chorus or something like that? Or is that not reasonable or feasible right now?
Well, I think when we are able to really get back into the Met, we're going to be able to do real performances again. And certainly the type of online stuff that we've been doing is really a Band-Aid. It doesn't artistically they're wonderful performances, but it's
not the same.
It's economic. It's not the same, and economically, it doesn't replace what we're all in this art form to do, which is to perform together in the same place with each other and with an audience. That's what makes the performing arts, and that's what we should never forget.
The visceral thrill of a live orchestra, of a live voice, of live performance. You can't replace it, and I agree completely. But maybe it's better that. What about a mini Met? I remember from years ago when I was, starting out at the Met, they were talking about taking down Roche Park next door and making a mini Met. So
we've been trying to think of ways to do some, smaller chamber-sized operas in different venues. In fact, one of the projects that we had that was canceled this past spring was a performance of Missy Mazzoli's Breaking the Waves.
Right.
Unique was going to conduct with a chamber-sized group from the Met at BAM in a production that was a co-production of BAM and the Scottish Opera and the Edinburgh Festival. So, you know, we're always looking for those kind of, you know, collaborations where we can do things outside of the Met building, and we'll continue to look for those opportunities. But all of that's going to be possible once again when we're beyond this wretched disease.
Horrible disease.
I know.
Can I ask one more hard question, and then you can be like, never want to talk to Carrie Alchema again?
Go ahead.
Okay. Is there any regret from not charging a fee to watch any of the Met HD, like even if it was $2 or something like that? Because I don't know the logistics of why that didn't happen, but what was the thought process of giving that for free instead of, are you tired of that question of, has everybody asked you that?
No, not so many people have asked me that. You're talking about the nightly streams.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the reasoning behind that was that we thought by the difference between offering these programs immediately, the minute we shut down, literally, we started offering these programs.
Right.
And we started offering them as kind of cultural relief. You know, we were coming to the rescue of people who were stuck in their homes and offering them the Metropolitan Opera in a way that, you know, was thrilling and surprising for them. And they responded with such gratitude. You know, we, as a result of that, of doing it that way, not charge it, and not, you know, I remember having discussions with our marketing people saying, I don't want people to have to log on and give you a life story. I want them to just sign their name and be able to get the goddamn thing.
Yeah.
And and it made a huge difference because people were so grateful initially. Now it's a much more modest number because we've been doing it for months now. But initially, hundreds of thousands of people were tuning in every night, right. And we, within a matter of 3 or 4 months, had 30,000 new donors to the Met and 150,000 new names in our database. None of that would have happened if we had charged for it. And charging a couple of bucks, we raised more money from donors who were so grateful that the Met did this by not telling them they had to pay for it than we would have if we had charged. I'm convinced of that. So I believe it was the right move. And I think it really strengthened the Met's position locally and internationally. You know, there's no company like the Met in the world that has the global fan base that we have. And I think, ironically, we've enhanced that even during the pandemic.
Okay.
Problem. How do you see a future of opera going forward? Do you see it having to change? Will it change? Do you think it'll ever be back the way it was?
I don't think opera will ever be back the way it was, even if there hadn't been a pandemic. I think it's changing all the time. I think that you know, the positive signs for opera are great in the sense that there's so much creativity in new composition. There are so many gifted artists who understand that opera can only be approached successfully today as a complete art form, both theatrically as well as musically. I think opera companies are more endangered than the art form of opera itself. I think that big opera companies have to figure out how to avoid becoming dinosaurs, and that's, you know, something we all have to work together to achieve. But you know, I think that people are less patient today than they were years ago, and although maybe the COVID crisis has taught people to be more patient, I don't know. But
it taught me to drink more.
To drink more. Me too.
That's all I know.
When we finish this call, I'm going to go have several.
I'm sorry.
Hater. You blondes grilled you. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm kidding. But I think that, you know, one of the things that, you know, we're very aware of and mindful of is audiences, you know, want to have maybe shorter experiences at the opera. we've announced, even in the 21-22 season, we've announced cutting some operas. I don't think there is any Baroque opera that was ever written that shouldn't be cut. And sorry about that.
Rossini and Donizetti too, I will say. I sing them, and I can say that too.
But I think that we're starting. We're going to have more curtains at an earlier starting time of 7 p.m. than 7:30 or 8. I think people want to go out earlier and go home earlier. We're trimming intermissions. We're removing the intermission from these between Acts 2 and 3 of our Butterfly production. We're presenting Boris in that 21-22 season in the original 2-hour and 1/4 version without any intermission. So it's kind of like unreels, like a film almost. There's, I think we have to work to make opera shorter, not longer. And for decades, the opposite was happening. Thanks to musicologists and conductors, and who felt that they were the guardians of composers. Every bit of composition, of every bit of score of every Baroque opera was found in every composer's relative's closet and all glued back together again to create operas that were longer than they ever were meant to be.
Oh yeah. And
just in the same way, when we produce, there's no Shakespeare company in the world that I know of. Maybe there must be some somewhere, but when they produce Hamlet, they produce Hamlet in 2 hours or 2.5 hours. They don't produce it in the 4.5 hours that it would be if you used every single word that Shakespeare wrote. So we have to think about the modern world in which we live and make opera adapt to that world.
I do find attention spans are shortened, especially now with all the social media, and because of the pandemic, people just are so scattered. And I think why not? Let's try it. Carrie, do you have anything else to say? Or can we ask you a few quick rapid fire questions? Is that okay, Peter? I know we've gone over.
If there's anything left in my brain at this point, yes.
I'm so sorry. So who is your favorite non-living diva?
My favorite non-living diva, I'd have to say Maria Callas.
Okay. Do you have a number 2?
Renata Tebaldi.
Okay. Nice.
Wow. Okay.
What is one thing that most people do not know about you?
I think everybody knows everything about me. One thing nobody repeat that question. Sorry, I'm not very good at this.
What's one thing that most people do not know about you?
That I ride my bicycle around Central Park a couple times a week.
Cool. I love that. Yeah.
How would you describe yourself in 3 words?
Beleaguered but unbowed.
Beleaguered but unbowed. And on that note, what is your favorite curse word in any language?
Carrie has to ask this one.
Come on.
Scheißkopf.
Scheiß. Okay. Perfect. Perfect.
Do you have any hobbies? Do you have any free time? I mean, do you have free time to have hobbies?
I really have no free time. I love playing tennis.
Okay.
And I've started, when the pandemic began, I started reading War and Peace.
Whoa.
Did you finish?
Yeah, right?
No.
I would be like,
oh
wow.
my gosh.
Well, good for trying. And Carrie, do you want to ask any more?
Yeah, what did you and Carrie do to just, I mean, you guys, it was New York City, you all were locked down. Did you stay in the city or were you able to get out?
We stayed almost the entire time in the city. We rented a house for a couple of weeks in the Berkshires in July, but otherwise we've been here. And we spent 5 or 6 days out in Fire Island.
Nice. Okay. Oh, how beautiful.
And
strange place. They have a lot of deer wandering around like zombies. Have you ever been to Fire Island?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen the zombie deer?
I have not. No, I have not seen that.
It's really weird. The deer just stand there looking at you, and it's a very strange place.
We live in the forest too. And the last question we always ask everyone.
Last question.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you enter the pearly gates? We've had every answer. Susan Graham's was really good.
I don't know the answer to that.
Why did I say yes to this?
Give me that one again.
Okay.
What do I?
If heaven
Terry?
exists, what do you want to hear God say as you walk through the pearly gates?
It's over.
It's, you can go drink your vodka now.
Oh, that makes me want to give you a hug. Thank you for what you're doing.
Peter.
Thank you for trying to keep this company alive and well. And I mean,
Yes.
even with all these questions, we still love you and still support you and want this just as badly as you. So thank you.
Well, I listen. I appreciate it. I know how much both of you are committed to opera and to your art.
And to the Met. I mean, I was a young artist there. I grew up there. It's my home. 25 years, you know, so I thank you for keeping it alive and keeping it open, and hopefully we will see you next season.
Yeah.
We'll be there, all of us.
All right. And I hope you don't feel like we put you on the spot.
Only slightly.
And Sandra, and it wasn't from you, Sandra, it was from me, so you're all right.
All right, Peter. Well,
It's all right.
thanks
Listen,
so much.
I enjoyed it, and I really did. And where are you with your whiskey? The beautiful view you have.
Oh, you know, we were living in downtown Nashville because my husband has I call it a normal job. And then we said, once we saw what was going on, I said, we need to get out of here. And our little nest egg that we were saving to buy downtown Nashville turned into buying a lake house. So what you see behind me are the trees, and on the other side of those trees is a lake. So
beautiful. But in Tennessee.
Yes, right outside of Nashville. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful?
That's beautiful. You know, Sandra Carey Lynn now has a Canadian passport. That's one of the things she did over the summer, was to claim her Canadian citizenship.
Wonderful.
Thank God.
So
Well,
that
you
she
know,
can hopefully facilitate her traveling around.
Good
it's
for her.
a good passport to have, because it's really helped me get over here to Europe.
Right,
How many
exactly.
American artists have not been able to fly over here to Europe? So yeah, I know. Well, please give her a big hug and kiss
Yeah,
from
please
us
give her
both.
our love.
And
Definitely.
thank you again, Peter. It was really lovely.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks a lot.
Take care.
Good talking to you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
ciao.
Ciao.